Welcome back to Ben on Politics. I'm your host, Ben Garves. As you can see, we took a couple solid weeks off to put together an awesome new set for the backdrop. BOP is finally growing up in the world. Here are some quick pictures of the whole fiasco. If this is your first time watching, I'm a former congressional candidate and current social rights activist. Today we're talking about the post-civil rights era civil rights movement, or as I like to call it, Civil Rights 2.0. A number of triggers, from unprovoked police violence in cities across the nation, to Trump's actions against minorities from Mexico and from majority Muslim countries, have incited new energy and momentum into the movement for equality. Our work is a little bit harder this time, though. Racism and prejudice aren't always the blatant, blunt political tools we once saw. They've grown over time into sharply honed and precisely targeted political assets. Instead of racial slurs, politicians are using coded terms, or dog whistles. They're the concept of manipulating bigotry, saying just enough to mobilize that block of voters without overtly offending those not harboring the same hatred and animosities. Politicians now use terms like inner city, inciting a mental image that blacks and Hispanics live in dangerous, poor, crime-ridden cities. They also try to scare you with terms like law and order. For more than half a century, Republicans have painted a picture and run on a premise that liberals and people of color, other than their own, are lawless. If these aren't helping you understand the concept, let's take a more recent one. You've probably heard stump speeches in which Republicans have referred to our last president as Barack Hussein Obama. You can more literally sense the animosity in the term. But we know immediately a Republican using Obama's middle name seeks to infuriate a conservative base who never truly let go of perceived imaginings of a falsified birth certificate. They're also hinging on mobilizing a voting bloc paranoid at the possibility of having a president of a faith not based in Christian ideals. And that's regardless of his true birthplace, regardless of his true religion, and regardless of a very profound and specific separation of church and state in our Constitution. Let's test you by talking about welfare. If you close your eyes, close your eyes. Go ahead and just close them. If you were told to imagine the waiting room in a welfare office, what do you see? What's the ethnic makeup of the room? Who has kids? Whose kids are behaving? Whose kids aren't behaving? Who's sitting calmly? Who's mad and yelling at the clerks? What neighborhood is this welfare office in? And what city? Now open your eyes. You better believe the majority of white America answers those questions black, 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 or brown, brown, brown with a sprinkle of white. The Latino kids, the black woman, the projects, the ghetto, the hood, Harlem, Brooklyn, New York, the South Side of Chicago, Atlanta. These are triggers. If a politician says Hussein, inner city, states' rights, law and order, welfare, welfare queen, child support, or strapping young buck, you may just hear words. But to the finely tuned ears of... Okay, sorry, I had to put this picture in. But to the finely tuned ears of those holding animosities, they pick up the racially motivated implied meanings of those dog whistle phrases. It's the thought of structured racism, saying just enough to trigger a bigoted block of voters to feel the implied animosity, unlike Trump, who just sometimes says blatantly racist things. It wasn't always approached this way. Systematic oppression to racial integration of neighborhoods started back up in 1976 with Democrat Jimmy Carter. Campaigning in Indiana, Carter said, "I have nothing against a community that's made up of people who are Polish or Czechoslovakian or French Canadian who are trying to maintain the ethnic purity of their neighborhood." Unfortunately, that's the exact argument of the alt-right white identity movement right now. The idea that races belong in communities and that those communities have absolutely no business interacting, or that the interaction would in some way be fake or forced. It's preying upon racial insecurities. People have criticized the Black Lives Matter movement as a bunch of unruly minorities having unprovoked protests. They say that if it was a real problem, these demonstrations would drive more interracial support. I say they need to take a look at the bigger picture. We haven't made it easy for these communities to unite. Whites addressing race issues somehow only tend to affirm the stereotypes they're trying to fight. We grew up not talking about race. Maybe it was that our parents didn't know how to talk about it, or maybe they thought not talking about race was their way of saying race issues didn't exist anymore. But being raised in a racial vacuum seems to make us ill prepared to talk about race issues when they do arise. Those who argue racial equality exists in America have never stepped foot in one of our poorly funded urban public schools. They've never seen the conditions endured by professors and students at historically black colleges around the world, like my alma mater, Mississippi Valley State University. Go Delta Devils. The people fighting racial inequality would never acknowledge it's harder for a black or brown man or woman to get a job in America, or that non-white workers make only 70% of what a white worker makes, or that Latino and black families are 27% less likely to own a home in their entire lifetime. It's easy to say Black Lives Matter. It's even easier to tweet about it, but real action involves getting out and getting involved in the community, mingling with races and cultures outside of our own, and being accepting of new experiences, and joining demonstrations and marches across the globe. I challenge you to join the movement. It's the dawn of the second civil rights era in America. Where will you be when history turns around and judges? Thank you for tuning in. My name is Ben Garves, and this has been another episode of Ben on Politics. Please like, share, follow, and comment, and I will see you next week. Don't forget, there's also the Ben on Politics podcast, available to stream now from anywhere podcasts are available.